Good evening, everyone, and welcome to What It Takes to Build a Digital Business event. This is our first event for this year's What It Takes Alumni Speaker Series for 24-25. And my name is Clelia Bevillard, and I'm the Senior Student Enterprise Manager for the We Network team at the University of Westminster. We Network offers access to training, mentoring, and funding for entrepreneurship and freelancing business ideas, or even for existing early stage businesses looking to grow. And our activities are open to all current students and recent graduates of the university. I have a few slides to share very briefly to give you a bit more information about the activities that we offer. So what we offer is a broad range of activities, including business idea competitions, as well as mentoring, personal development workshops, and training in how to start a limited company, as well as a freelancing business. And all of these activities involve very practical, hands-on exercises, as well as guest speakers with direct experience in setting up businesses. And there is a range of events happening throughout the year. One of our key programs, the Startup 101 program, includes linear series of workshops, as well as mentoring and a pioneer bursary, which gives you an opportunity to win up to £500 of funding for taking part in this program. And we have an equivalent program supporting aspiring freelancers. Again, a very similar support, comprehensive program, including workshops, mentoring, and pitching opportunities, as well as a great amount of funding to help you get started in those early stages. The final program I wanted to highlight this evening is also our Skills Lab workshop series, which covers a range of individual events covering business, commercial, and digital skills to help you start and grow your business as well. For more information, please visit our webpage, which will be shared in the chat. And we also have a newsletter that you're welcome to join to receive our latest news and opportunities available, as well as a LinkedIn group open to anyone interested in, again, finding out the latest information for programs, opportunities, event tickets available. Before I introduce our speaker for this evening's event, I wanted to mention that this talk is being recorded and it will be edited and made available on our YouTube channel when it's ready, and we will send you the link after this event. Your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off and the live general group chat is on. Please use the general chat box to ask our guest speaker this evening any questions you may have, and colleagues will be moderating the chat to collect questions throughout. So please feel free to put your questions in there. Now introducing our guest speaker for this evening, I'm delighted to introduce our alumni speaker, Sally Foote, who will share her top tips on how to build a digital business. Sally graduated from Westminster in 2003 with an MSc in Business Information Technology and is currently Chief Commercial Officer for Carwow. She has over 20 years' experience in building and scaling digital products and businesses across a wide range of industries. And during this talk, Sally will draw on her wealth of experience in building digital businesses successfully and will share what she has learned during her career journey. I will now pass over to Sally, and then I'll come back online for the Q&A. And please do remember to put any questions you have in the general chat box throughout Sally's presentation. Over to Sally.
Thank you so much, Clelia. Really appreciate that. Just checking you can see my slides okay.
Yes, they're all set up nicely. Thank you.
Great. And the way my setup is done, I can't see anything in the screen at the same time as I'm presenting. So do just come off mute if something goes wrong midway. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, and appreciate your time and listening to what I've got to share. It was quite fun pulling this together to talk through with you this evening. I'm Sally, and as Clelia said, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Carwow. And that little Fiat 500 is currently one of my favorite cars. It still feels extremely weird to say that because I am not a car person at all. I'd argue that until now I have really strongly disliked cars and I've had no interest in cars at all. So what am I doing at Carwow? Well, first, let me tell you a little bit about Carwow. Carwow is a car-changing marketplace. So what we do is we build an enormous audience of people who are starting to consider changing their cars. We do that through a bunch of different ways, one of which is our YouTube channel. It's now one of the biggest automotive channels in the world. We just recently overtook Top Gear. We have 11 million subscribers to that. And then we also write a lot of content, both on our Carwow website and through some of our other publications like Evo magazine, which you may have heard of, and Auto Express. And all of these pieces of content and editorial help to attract people who are starting to think about maybe finding a new car, or for my bit of the business, starting to sell their car. And so you'll see there that last year we had nearly just under 818,000 people found cars that they were interested enough in Carwow on to send an inquiry to a dealer and to find out whether they could buy that car. But we also had 63,000 cars that were sold on Carwow last year, and that meant that a customer came in, they made a listing of information about their car, and they listed that car for sale, and we sold it to one of our dealer groups. And that's the bit of the business of Carwow that I run. But remember that I said I don't like cars and I'm not that interested in cars. Why am I here? Well, the bit that I run of Carwow is really the growth engine for Carwow. So this year we've had nearly 2.5, nearly 2.5 million valuations on Carwow. That's 2.5 million people in the UK who have so far this year come onto Carwow to value their car and understand how much their car costs. And that has been a phenomenal growth year on year. Our cars that we've had listed for sale have increased by 53% year on year. And you can see on the right-hand side there, the revenue growth that we've had in this bit of the business over the last 3 or 4 years. So 2021, that was about £1 million. And this year we will grow our business to around 26, 27 million pounds. So it's a real scale up, and it's the heart of the Carwow growth story is the bit that I run. So that's partly what I'm doing at Carwow, but also it's worth saying that I've had a very squiggly journey to get here, as one of my colleagues would say, a squiggly career. I started out, I studied journalism. My first degree was in journalism, and I worked in that for a number of years, making documentaries and trying to change the world by telling difficult stories. And then when I moved to the UK, I took a job at The Guardian, which was a newspaper that I really respected. I got a job as a secretary on an IT project, and I got very, very interested in technology and its ability to transform businesses and where it was all going. And that was when I did my MSc at Westminster. And I then moved into starting to look at building technology or digital experiences for customers. And my biggest piece of work that I did next was at the Times and Sunday Times, where I built their paywall. And I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. But I, at that point, started to really focus on product at the heart of my career. And I spent a number of time, a big portion of my time leading product teams and helping to build out digital products before I then diversified again and took on marketing at Go Compare. And now in my current role, you may be asking yourself, what is a chief commercial officer, Sally? Well, it's actually quite a broad role. I have within my team, I have product teams who are building and developing our website and our tools that fit customers' face. I have commercial teams who are out dealing with customers and what we call our partners, car dealers, doing deals. I have trading people who are looking at the performance of the business, and I've also got operations teams within my team. So quite a big team and very, very mix of things. And as I said, I've had quite a squiggly career to get here. It's been an interesting journey. And the reason that I have landed up in Carwow is a little bit because I'm running the growth engine, but also because it's a very, very interesting marketplace. And this is where I wanted to start with talking to you tonight is if you are thinking about trying to build your own digital business, or you're thinking about building and working in scale ups like mine, the first thing that you need to look for is a marketplace or a category or sector where things are changing. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment, about why that makes it exciting. But the first thing to do is like, well, how do I find a marketplace that's changing? So the first thing you need to do is you need to look for annoyed customers. So marketplaces that are changing, you generally find that the consumers who are buying or transacting in that space are really frustrated with the quality of the customer experience that they're getting, and they're annoyed by it, and they're constantly moaning about it. And then you also see that the incumbents, or the people that are operating the big businesses in that space, have become lazy. They've become bloated, and they're not being challenged, and they're not responding to those frustrated customers. And if you think about businesses like Deliveroo or Uber or any of those kind of big tech scale-ups that we've seen in the last few years, this is exactly where they started, was in marketplaces like this, where customers were frustrated, and the businesses that were operating in and running those spaces were not really doing anything that was innovative or different. But what you will also see in marketplaces that are changing is these cheeky little innovators who are starting to do interesting things around the side. That, by the way, there's going to be a lot of cars in this presentation, is a really cute little car called an Ami, and it's a very interesting innovation from Citroën. It's one of the cheapest EVs available on the market, and it's a really fun car. If you want to ask me more questions about that in the chat, I'll tell you more about why that is my second favorite car, the Ami. Anyway, so what you'll see in these marketplaces that are starting to change is you'll see innovation starting to happen on the outside. A while back, I worked in the insurance space, and another reason why I took that role was because I could see all of these things starting, these market dynamics starting to happen, and you started seeing some very interesting little innovation, smaller businesses doing innovative new insurance products on the side. And how did I know that these marketplaces were interesting places to do business? And I can tell you that I spent a lot of time in newspapers through my career. I mentioned The Guardian, and when I was at The Guardian, it was very early days. Many of you will not even remember these days. The internet was still a relatively new thing, and so the business at the time was having its business model, its print business model, disrupted. It was figuring out how to publish online, and then when I was at the Times, that business model that had evolved to attract loads and loads of people and give them loads and loads of free content wasn't working anymore, and we were trying to figure out how to change it and how to get people to pay for content. And in both of those businesses, you got to do really interesting things. And this is what's true about a marketplace that's changing, is that the old rules don't apply. The dynamics of that marketplace are changing. And so if you can work in a business that's trying to tackle that problem, you get to do really interesting stuff. You get to challenge decisions, you get to make big bets, and you get to do projects that are quite audacious or difficult. And at the Times, when we launched the paywall, we were told by everyone it was never going to work. Everyone by that point was very used to reading loads of content online for free, and everyone was confident that no one was going to pay for the Times, and that wasn't the right thing to be doing for the business. But actually, as a business, we knew that the old model just wasn't sustainable anymore. All of the ad pounds, the money that people used to pay us to advertise on the Times, was flowing into different places like Facebook or smaller websites and blogs, for example. And so there just wasn't as much cash available. So we knew we had to change the business model. And so when we launched that paywall, it was a really innovative and new thing to do, and it was considered quite audacious. And those types of projects are super exciting to be involved in. So that's the first thing that you're looking for. And really, this is why I'm at Carwow, because the automotive industry at the moment has all of those qualities. It's I would argue, one of the most interesting places to be doing business at the moment. You have all sorts of dynamics that are changing. For one thing, it's one of the last industries to actually move online. So if you think about all of the transactions that you do in your day-to-day life, all the things that you do, most of them are already online in some shape or form. But buying and selling a car is still something that is quite often still done in car dealerships or in a big supermarket, in a big car supermarket, rather than shopping online. And obviously COVID has helped to accelerate that a bit, but this is still one of the more slow moving industries in terms of moving the transactions online. And then within the market, all the dynamics are changing. So car manufacturers are at the moment trying to work out how to sell cars themselves directly to consumers rather than using their dealerships. And that means the dynamics are changing. But we're also facing into what is one of the most exciting transformations that I would argue human beings are going to see in the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps aside from AI, which is the electrification of vehicles. And that is creating all sorts of shifting dynamics. People who are going to go and drive those cars are driving a whole new kind of thing when they drive an electric vehicle. It's very different to driving a petrol vehicle, and the dynamics of who's good at selling those cars and who's not good at selling those cars is changing. Plus, we're going to, in the next 30 years within the UK, within the next 2 or 3 years within the UK, see about 30 new brands be launched in the UK, car brands that you've never currently heard of. Who will all be launching new EVs in the UK at very competitive prices. So all of the market dynamics are going to shift. And then the market dynamics that we operate in actually shift on a day-to-day basis. So a government will announce a new policy or a new incentive to get people into EVs, and suddenly people will stop exploring them, or they'll get more excited about them, and the price points will change. And all of that makes for a very, very exciting place to do business and to build a digital business. And essentially, this is why I am at Carwow, because my career story is that I've spent my time working in these types of industries that are changing and shifting, and as a result I've got to do some very, very interesting projects. And so once you've found a marketplace that has got those dynamics of shift happening and you're excited about the opportunity to work in there, the next thing you need to do is you need to figure out what the problem is that you want to solve. And actually, this is quite a personal question, because I do believe that if you are going to be building a business, you have to believe that the problem that you are going to spend your time on, your energy in, your enthusiasm, your life on, is one that interests you, that you can feel passionate about, that you can feel excited about. And so within that market, you need to go and find something that you can care about and pour your energies into. Now, for me, at the times, it was that our business model was broken, and that I fundamentally believed in the power of journalism, and that journalism should be invested in, that we should be able to hire great journalists, and that journalists should be fairly paid for their work, and that the work that they produced was of an extraordinary ability to change the world. And so getting people to pay for that and finding payment models that would work for that would fund the research and work that journalists did, was really, really important. And so I really believed that this was the right thing to do. And likewise at Carwow, I think selling your car is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And most of the people that I speak to, our customers or friends or family, or even my own experiences, tell me that that car selling experience is really broken, and people are afraid of it. They feel like they're being cheated, and that they're not always getting a good deal, and it's fraught with all sorts of problems. And that felt like a really important problem to me to get involved with solving, particularly because it's often one of the most expensive purchases we'll make, and making a bad decision when you're buying a car can have a really big impact on your wealth. But also when you're selling a car, you want to get as much value from selling that car as you deserve because of the fair market price of that car. And so when I looked at this marketplace and I understood what Carwow did in terms of being able to help customers change their cars, that is a problem that I can believe in. But you need to find one that you can really, really believe in. And then you really need to make sure that you totally understand that problem. And I'm sure many of you will have already started to explore problems you're interested in, and you will have started to talk to family and friends about this. You may even have done some customer research. But the first thing that's really in any business or in any problem exploration you need to do is you need to get out into real life. And that always starts with being the customer. So when I first got to Carwow, one of the first things that I did was I did lots and lots of some people call it dog fooding, or eating your own dog food, or that type of phrase, but basically means being the customer and going out. And I did loads and loads of test drives. So I didn't tell our dealers that I was coming to see them, and I booked in test drives. And this is another little car that I think is quite cute. You can see there's a theme. I like cute little cars. This is an Aura Funky Cat. You may not have heard of Aura. They're a new Chinese brand that have been launching models in the UK, and this is one of their early models. This is just a very cute car. And I did loads of this. I went into quite a few of our dealerships and understood what they were doing, and I asked them questions as I would as a consumer, and I looked at how they treated the consumer, and I asked them about our company and what they thought about our company and what they thought about working with Carwow, without them knowing that was me. And I also spent a lot of time much more transparently with our partners who are our car dealerships, sitting with them and watching them doing their jobs and watching them using our platform and understanding what was hard or difficult about that. And if you're doing anything in the business to business space, i.e. your customers are other businesses, this is absolutely critical. You need to be able to go and sit at their desk and look at what's going on around their computer and look at what they're doing with the service that you are provisioning them, and you will learn more from that half hour you spend than you will from reading any number of market research papers or anything of that kind. It's absolutely critical. Now, for those of you who understand how customer research works, there's a bunch of different methods you can use. You can go and interview people, you can do surveys, all of that type of stuff. But one of the things that I've really learned through my career is that you have to really understand what people are telling you, and we'll come on to that again in a moment, but you've also got to decide what you listen to out of that, because it's very easy to get some of the wrong results. And so you can't just ask customers for the answers. I think there's a very famous Ford quote on this. Henry Ford, who designed and manufactured the first kind of mass market car, the Model T Ford, said that if you ask people what they would want, they would tell you that they wanted a faster horse. And of course, this is so true when it comes to customer research, is making sure that the information customers are giving to you is appropriate to what you're trying to do. And I wanted to tell you about a very interesting example we had with this at the Times, where we were redesigning the homepage of the Times newspaper. As you can imagine, there was a lot of interest from around the business, and everyone wanted all their things on the homepage. Homepage is a very important top of funnel, getting people into the site page. And so there was a lot of competition, and everyone had ideas about what we should be putting on this page. And so we were taking it out to test with customers. And what we did was we made all these cards of all the things that we could put on the home page, and we gave them to customers, and we said, I put these in order of importance. And we did this through several groups. And a number of the groups all put the weather as one of the top 3 things that the Times should be able to tell them about. And we were so confused by this. What? The weather feed was one of the lowest importance parts of what the Times did, compared to all of the other journalism we did. And we actually bought that feed just off a really cheap provider. So we just couldn't understand this. And of course, people were telling us through this research that they wanted to know about the weather, but it really wasn't their job to decide whether they really needed to hear about the weather from the Times, or whether there were other better sources for them to obtain that information. So of course, we tested it, we took the weather out, and no one ever said, oh my goodness, where's the weather? And really, I just wanted to share this example with you as a reminder that it's so important to do customer testing, but your own lens and view of that information that you're getting back from your customers is equally important, because you've got to realign it back with your business purpose and what you're trying to solve when you're building that digital business. The next thing that you need to be very careful with customer research is that you are, and as you're trying to evolve what your business proposition looks like, is to make sure that you are solving the right problem for your customers. And this was another lesson that I learned the hard way. There's quite a few of those in here. And this was at a business called Photobox, which many of you have probably heard of. You might have used Photobox to make albums, make photo albums or print gifts. And when I was at Photobox, we were working on the problem of helping customers to make photo albums. And we found that they were taking about 8 hours on average to make their photo album. They would take all their photographs, put them into the book, and then we would print it for them. 8 hours is quite a long time, and this wasn't like elapsed time. They would spend that 8 hours over weeks, months. Some customers would start their album in January and finish it just in time for Christmas. So a 12-month process to kind of make this. And we felt like this was a really interesting problem that AI would be able to help us with. And we already had some great photo science that could analyze a photo and understand what that photo was about. And we also had 20 years worth of photo books that customers had made that we could train our model on so that it could understand how to make a photo book. We're like, well, this is brilliant. And we invested lots of time and effort, and we built this incredible piece of technology that could make a photo book from a set of photographs. And we tested it with some customers, and we got them to make an album, and they wrote a time diary. This is how long it took me. And then we got them to use the technology, and they made a photo album. Wow, and it was 80% faster. Can you imagine? We were so pleased with ourselves. We're like, wow, we've improved this problem 80%. What an amazing result. And so we put this technology live, and we made a big button that said, "Hey, let the AI make the book for you," something like that. Slightly better worded, obviously, thanks to our marketing teams. And we put this live, and nobody pressed the button. Well, very few people did. Sort of 1 or 2 people out of the 100 people, every 100 people who were going through that page. We couldn't understand it. We were like, "What's the problem? Like, why don't you want your books to be made 80% faster?" And of course, when we then dug into it with more conversations with researchers, with our researchers and our customer base, what we discovered was they did want it to be faster. They wanted it to be easier, but they still wanted to have some editorial control, some authorship over that book. And they wanted us to automate the boring bits, like deleting the photographs that were duplicates, or like grouping photographs together that should be on the same page. And so obviously our second version of that service that we launched was very different, and it was about solving the problems that customers really wanted us to solve, rather than trying to solve the whole thing. And I hope that example really resonates, and that you remember it, because it's so easy to go in and solve a problem with technology, rather than to really understand the problem and then figure out the technology that's the best place to solve that on top of that. The next thing that you really need to do is to remember your competitors. Just add a little alien in there for you, because we never really operate alone. Even in any business, no matter what you're doing, even if you think you're inventing something completely new, you are going to be measured against, and you are going to be drawing consumers or customers away from something else, some other way that they've done that before, some other place that they've bought that before, or some of the business that has been doing it in a slightly different way to you. And so when you're considering your competitors, there's 2 things that you need to look at your competitors. There's 2 perspectives that you need to have when you look at your competitors. First of all, you've got to know who they are. So who are you trying to go after? But once you know that, you've got to first of all start with understanding what the table stakes are in your industry or in your product set. Now, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this phrase, so I'm just going to explain it. But when you play poker, I believe, I don't play poker, but when you play poker, there is sort of a minimum number of cards and money that you have to put in, that everyone gets everyone to the same level when the game starts. And this is called table stakes. It's the minimum, or the benchmark, that you need to meet in order to participate in that market. And I think quite often when people are building digital businesses, certainly at the early stages, the approach that people take to this is like, well, our product is still what might be called a minimum viable product, or an MVP. It's not quite there yet. There's things that aren't quite working with it yet. But that's okay, because we will make it cheaper. So that's a good idea, because then people will choose it because it's cheaper. And there's an element of that may work, but it is not always going to work. And again, I wanted to share another lesson learned with you as an example of this. And this is another one from Photobox. When I joined Photobox, we had been printing photographs, so from your camera roll, from your phone camera roll, for about 15 years, and we had never had anyone complain about the quality of those photographs. Not at a degree to which we would have paid attention to it. And then we did something to totally change that, which was that we launched an app that allowed you to print your photographs for free. So you could log on to this app, upload all your photographs, and print them for free, pay a little bit for postage, and we would send those photographs to you, and it was all free. And what that did was it drove an enormous spike in the number of people who were complaining that our quality of our photo printing was not good enough. Even though those photos were the same photos that people had been paying for years, they were now free, and suddenly everyone was complaining about the quality. And the reason for that was because we had just moved into a different competitor space. We had now had a very similar offer to another business who also offered a free print service, and customers were using both of those to free print services, and they were comparing the quality of the prints between those two apps. And this is a wall that our team built, comparing photo prints between the two apps to see what they could find. And actually what this exposed was that our photo quality was not at table stakes for that free market. Extraordinary, right? But it was not good enough, and actually we did need to improve the quality of the printing of our photographs. And that was a really, really important lesson in understanding what the benchmark is across your industry, across your category, across your product line for your customers, and what they are going to be comparing you to. The next thing you then need to take a look at is what your differentiators are. How are you going to be different from your competitors? There's a really, really good strategy consultant, writer, speaker, thinker. You can find him on LinkedIn. His name is Alex M.H. Smith, and he's really great, actually. If you think about strategy, he really simplifies strategy down to very simplistic frameworks, and his stuff is just incredible. And he has this great way of talking about differentiation. He says, go around in your business or your company or who's working in your team and ask them, how are we different from our competitors? And your instinct would be that you should get a whole bunch of different reasons. Well, we're different because of this, and we're different because of this, and we've got this that's different. And that is actually totally the wrong answer. What you actually want your team to be able to say, and what you want yourself to be able to say, is we are different because of this one core strategic differentiator. There's one thing that we do totally different to anyone else, and it's that thing that you can very clearly communicate to your customers and in your marketing. And the example that I wanted to share here was, I wasn't involved in this project personally, but I got the case study firsthand from someone who was involved in this project, and I thought it was absolutely exceptional. And this was Asos, brand you'll be very familiar with, I hope, UK-based business who were expanding internationally, and they were looking at the Australian market and trying to figure out what they could do to launch there and differentiate there. And so what they did was they went along and they looked at the Australian market, and they understood the competitor set. And what they found was that there wasn't too little fashion or clothing or anything you want to call it in Australia. But what they did find was that Australian fashion delivery was comparatively slow to what they'd been able to achieve in Europe. And so they realized that in order to break into the Australian market, they could differentiate on speed of delivery. Now, this is extraordinary for a business that is halfway around the world, right? To be able to deliver to the Australian door fronts faster than anyone else in Australia. And it was very technically complicated for them to do. They had to rearrange all of their UK workshops and workflows and warehouses and processes to be able to do all of their Australian deliveries packaging first thing in the morning. They worked with Australia Post to be able to pre-print all their shipping labels, print them in the UK, put them on all the packages. All of those packages were on a flight out of Heathrow by 11 o'clock every morning. And that meant that if you ordered from Australia, all the way via the UK, it was on a doorstep in Australia in 48 hours, which was something that no other fashion retailer in Australia could do at the time. Now, that is an extraordinary differentiator, very costly in some regards, but it enabled them to really grab and differentiate in that market before they then came back and tackled costs. Now, I thought at Carwow we think about this a lot, obviously. Selling your car online in the way that we do with Carwow is still a relatively new thing to do. Ourselves, Motorway, and We Buy Any Car, really the three big players in there, and yet only 10% of people who are privately selling their car use this as a method. It's still a really small proportion of people selling their cars, and it's growing year on year, but it's still very small. And even still, even though it's only 10%, we know that those sellers go and compare the prices in at least 3 places online. And even though 75% of people are now only pricing their cars online, they do that in 3 places. So no matter who comes to our site, no matter how big that audience is that I told you at the beginning, they are going to other places to compare prices. And so that is a very important part of our strategy. pricing is a really key lever for us. We've identified it as one of the big things that we have to get right. We have a team who are focused on pricing. We have a significant investment in ML modeling behind our pricing, and huge data sets that we both buy in and build ourselves to be able to do that. But we also regularly benchmark ourselves against our competitors to understand that if someone is coming to Carwow to price their car, what else are they seeing on our competitors? So price is a really important part of that. But we also, like ASOS, understand what customers are trading off. And what we know is that most customers are trading off convenience and price. So if you want to sell your car really fast and really conveniently, you want to know the transaction is going to go ahead, you go to We Buy Any Car, you go and drop it off in a car park, they give you your cash and you get the bus home. It's a very disappointing and sad experience, but if you want to know that your car is going to sell, that's a great way to do it. Likewise, you can go into a dealership and most of them will take your car off you. But in both of those cases, you won't be getting the best price for your car, because you'll get a better price for your car if you go to a competitive market like ours, where there's multiple people who all want to buy your car and they're bidding against each other to get your car, or to a private seller where someone might not necessarily know as much about that car, or they're not trying to sell that car on, so they're happy to pay a little bit more for that car. Now, when we build our strategy, what we think about at Carwow is how do we compete on price for having loads of dealers bidding for your car, but also how do we support you on convenience, so that when you're thinking about going to We Buy Any Car and you're thinking about that disappointment of getting the bus home, we're going to tell you, don't worry, we'll make sure your car gets sold, but we'll also pick it up for you from home in the same way, and that's a bit better than getting the bus home. And I think it's really just talking about how you think about why people are going to your competitors and what they're going to be looking for, and ensuring that your plan for your digital business is balancing and looking at both of those things. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is how you define what your proposition is. Now, you could do whole talks on this, like how to design a product, how to design a proposition, how to design your website, and there are much better people than me to do that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the thing that is most important in all of that, because no matter what your idea is, and no matter how carefully you've tested that with customers, you're going to need to focus on the details and understanding what the most important detail is to a customer. And to tell you this story, I'm going to tell you another story about a physical product. And this was another project that I did at Photebox. And it was a baby board book. We were launching a new type of book, and it's one of those ones that you give children that they can chew. And we'd spent a lot of money developing this book. I hope you can see me waving it. I've got one here. And this book, we invested in making sure it was kind of child safe. We'd invested lots of money in making sure it was very sturdy. And we'd done a lot of testing on it. I actually left one in my daughter's nursery for like 3 months and got it back again. It was still intact, like great. I put one in a dishwasher. If anyone needs to see a photo of that, I'm happy to share it. So we knew this was a really sturdy and strong book, and that it was more than capable of being manhandled by a toddler. And yet when we were testing it with customers, they kept saying things like, oh, I'm a bit worried about whether it's going to fall apart. It seems a bit flimsy to me. We just sort of we just couldn't believe this. We was like, where was this coming from? Why were people feeling that way about this book? And so I'm going to ask you to do something quite strange now. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes just for a minute and listen very, very carefully to this sound. I'm going to open this book. So close your eyes and have a listen. And you will have heard that sound there. You can open your eyes again, by the way, otherwise it would get very weird. But open your eyes again, and you'll see, hopefully you can see me pointing to the spine of this book. And what happens is when this book's manufactured, the pages get glued together, and then the cover gets put on. And what happens is the glue and the cover kind of stick together a little bit. And so the first time you open it, or it hasn't been open for a while, it makes that sort of snapping sound. And this is what people were hearing in our customer research is they were hearing that snapping sound and thinking that the book was really, really, really fragile as a result, and that their children were going to rip it to shreds in seconds, when actually there was no chance of that ever happening. And so once we'd established that, we realized that we were going to have to change our production line, and we actually went and made a bunch of really expensive changes. That meant we could get rid of that sound. It was quite a complex thing to do, but it was incredibly important to building trust in the product and ensuring that people came back and bought more of these books and felt confident about buying it. And I'm telling you that physical product story because the thing I want you to take away from it is that it is all about the detail. And when it comes to digital, it's all about the detail of every element of your digital experience, but it is also about the detailed management of your P&L, or your profit and loss statement, or what we would call your transaction funnel. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that now. So when you are managing a digital business and when you're trying to scale a business, as we have done at Carwow, the thing you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you get the most from your money. And you really manage that with maths all of the way through your business. And it falls into sort of three buckets: getting customers in the door, getting them to buy from you, and then getting them to come back. And so in every single digital business, let's start with getting customers in the door. In every single digital business that I have worked in over the last 20 years, this has been a consistent challenge. It is more and more expensive every year to get customers in the door, to get them onto your website and to get them, or onto your app, and to get them moving through to a point of transaction. So if you have a commercial business, this is absolutely going to be one of the problems that you face. And the first thing is you will constantly worrying about this problem. This particular chart is showing you our PPC cost. That's one of the things that we spend money on. We also spend money on what's called above the line advertising or marketing. We also spend money on affiliate relationships. That's other websites that might send us traffic and we pay them to do so. And we spend money on social channels and advertising on social channels. And we spend money, as I said, on our YouTube channel and building an organic audience. And we get some free search from Google, but increasingly it's very, very difficult to build a business with organic traffic from Google. But all of these things add up, and every single year, the cost of that marketing investment goes up. And so to control the cost of that marketing investment, but still to continue bringing more people in, we've got to be converting those customers really well into transacting customers. And so what that means is that we have to monitor every single part of our conversion journey. And again, in every business you work in, from a digital point of view, you break down your funnel into the parts of that journey. And this is the top of the Carwow funnel, where someone comes onto the site and they value a car. They then start a listing, so they put information in about their car. We call that a listing. And at some point, they go on to complete that listing, adding all the photographs and all the information that we might need to be able to help them to sell that car. And what you'll see from this is that we get drop-off all the way through that top half of the funnel. And again, this is very, very typical of any digital business I've worked in. And so my team and I are constantly looking at what we would expect this funnel to look like. We are running projects that are aimed at getting more people to start a listing, or more people to complete a listing, or more people to move further along that funnel down the line. And we are constantly trying to improve what is effectively making the most of those customers that we have paid to bring in. And of course, the more customers we can get moving through, the more money we can make off those transactions. And that allows us to put more money into our marketing at the other end down the line, or to reduce the amount we're spending next year, but still get the same amount of customers in, the same amount of revenue in. So I said there were three things. The first thing is getting your customers in the door, being smart about your marketing economics. The second thing is converting those customers into customers who are revenue generating. And then the third thing is getting those customers to come back. What you don't want is a situation where you have to pay for that same customer to come back every single year. Every single year you're paying for that coming through Google. What you want is those customers to come back to you straight away. Now, in a business that is an e-commerce business, i.e. Someone who is coming in, so for example, groceries or gifts, that has usually got a high frequency rate. So you might expect someone to come back from a grocery business, hopefully once a week, or a gifting business once every 2 to 3 months. But in a number of businesses, particularly the last two that I've worked in, that's a lot bigger challenge. Someone's only going to sell their car every 3 to 7 years, basically. And in my previous business at Go Compare, someone is only going to renew their insurance once a year. And so you have to get really creative about how you do this. Now, so hopefully some of you will recognize this gentleman. He's currently on Strictly Come Dancing, I believe, but I knew him as Win Evans or Gio Compario, who is our kind of mascot at Go Compare. And Gio is here to just remind us that it was very difficult to get people to come back to an insurance comparison site. There's a lot of draw on that attention. When someone's coming to the point of renewing their car insurance, they're getting bombarded from all over the place because everyone knows the date that they're going to renew their car insurance. And so what we did to be very creative about getting people to come back is we launched a special insurance product that meant if you came through Go Compare would cover your excess in the event of an accident. So if you had an accident and you had to claim on your insurance, usually you would have to pay £250 yourself, but Go Compare provided an insurance policy that would cover that £250, which was an extraordinary thing to do and very, very different from anything that any of the competitors were doing. And that single creative piece drove a 20% increase in our retention rate. 20% more customers came straight back to Go Compare the following year, either directly to our website or through an email that we sent them. And that saved us an enormous amount of money and was able to mean that we could invest more into bringing more customers in rather than just buying back the same customers every year. So attention to detail in the digital world is attention to what we would call your funnel, your conversion funnel, making sure you're getting people in the top, you're converting that traffic well, and then that you're bringing it back into your business. Many of you will recognize this, although it might look a little bit dated. It's a Dyson hand dryer, and this is, I think, one of the very first ones that they ever put out in about 2008. And I'm showing you a picture of this Dyson hand dryer because I'm very sorry to say that I took a job because of it, and it was a big mistake. I'll give you a bit of context. I had been at The Guardian for a very long time, about 9 years, and The Guardian at the time had very little money indeed, and we were in all of these quite really old buildings that were sort of scattered around Farringdon Road. We had a bit of a mouse problem, and so I actually remember once picking up what I thought was a board duster off the floor to clean a board and realizing that it was a mouse trap and having all the kind of pellets run down my arm. You know, I'm making it sound a bit more disgusting than it was, but basically I'm painting a picture of a company that was really tight on kind of economics, very, very values driven, and I went for an interview at Sky. Again, most of you have heard of Sky, the broadcaster, quite an extraordinary business, a lot wealthier, a lot bigger, a lot more polished. And I got really excited during the interview. I was being asked to come and join what was called Project Carlsberg, which was about making customer experience the best that it possibly could be. And everyone I met through this process was deeply, deeply commercial. They all knew what the top number was at the top of the organization, and they knew every single person knew which bit of that number they needed to deliver. I found that really compelling. In fact, I think it is really compelling. I've used it in many businesses that I've worked in since. But I was like, wow, this is amazing. And after the interview, I went into the bathroom and then came to dry my hands in this hand dryer. And I was like, oh my God, this hand dryer is amazing. I love this business. I want to work here every day. Look at the branding. Isn't it amazing? And I'm sorry to say that I lasted about 3 months in that job because by the time I got there, they were into kind of cost-cutting mode. The project that I'd been working on had been shut down and I got put on something else. And I also learned that while this was an extraordinary business with an amazing product, I was going to get to work on a very, very tiny little piece of it in a big company. And I wasn't really going to be able to look at what my impact was or understand what I was being able to do. I could see what my number was that I was moving, but that was a kind of some of my impact. And I realized then, and I've kind of realized since that, the place that I love doing business in is smaller companies where I get to have a broader remit and I can really feel and see the impact of the work that I'm doing. And I'm telling you this story because I really want to encourage you, if you don't do your own startup, if you go and join a startup, or you go and join a business, to make sure that you choose the business that's right for you rather than one that has a shiny product, because a product isn't always going to represent the type of business that you're going to love working in. And the big glossy brands are not always the most interesting places to be working. And the final example that I wanted to share on this is, if I said to you, whether you're into cars or not into cars, would you like to go and work for Ferrari, or would you like to go and work for Nissan? I'm guessing that most people would be like, oh, Ferrari, okay, really interesting, beautiful cars, so glossy, so amazing. But if you are interested in EV transformation, the last place you should be spending any time is Ferrari. Their first EV is going to be coming out in 2025. And Nissan, on the other hand, launched their first EV. This is a Nissan Leaf, not my favorite car, but very, very, very impactful in terms of the change that it's wrought in the market, and it's making EVs affordable. And Nissan launched this car in 2010, so 15 years ahead of anything that Ferrari have done. And Nissan is a really, really interesting business. They have massively invested in their battery technology. And next year, they are going to be launching their first car, this one, which is called the snappily IML6. I have to read this, Max Lightyear. But what's interesting about this car is that it has what's called a solid state battery. So this is whole new battery technology that they are bringing out, and it's going to have a 620-mile range, which is well more than double than most of the really long range EVs. So absolutely transformative in terms of the technology that is being built in this business, and the forward thinkingness of this company and the types of cars that they are going to be producing. And so I really want you to encourage you to think about who is doing the really interesting stuff and find those businesses to go and work in. But you also need to look at, when you're considering a role in another business, startup, VC, whatever it might be, is you need to understand where the money is coming from, and you need to understand where that money is going to go. Listed businesses, it's very easy to do this. So for a business, a PLC or a PLC that is listed on the stock exchange, you can get all of this information from their public reports, and you absolutely should. You should go and research that business. You should understand what they intend to invest in, what their strategy is, how they're executing on it, and that is what you should go and do. That is the homework that you should go and do. But if you're thinking about joining a smaller business, so a VC or private equity backed business where there's funded, so investors have put their money into that business, then you need to understand a little bit about how that story is going to play out. Because what typically happens in one of those businesses is that they are either acquired by a private equity, or that might be a single acquisition, so they have one private equity owner, or they might have a mixed cap table, which means that they've got multiple investors and they've just recently taken an investment. Carwow is a case in point. We've just recently taken a big round of investment. And what you generally see after that left-hand side of this diagram is you generally see a new leadership coming in. So there might be a new CEO, or there'd be some new hires into the executive team. And that team are being brought in to deliver a new strategy and direction for the business, which is usually very clearly set out in that acquisition thesis or in that investment thesis. So you come out the back of that stage of the company, and there's a very relatively clear plan of what that business is going to be doing for the next period of time. And then at some point, that business will transition to prepare for sale, and they will go through a period of preparing for that sale or exit or an IPO or something of that case, and the investment structure or the next round of investment. I've used sale there, but it could be next round of investment, or it could be an IPO or something like that. And the reason this is really important is because the most interesting places to join this business is immediately after that investment or acquisition or that change of ownership model, because that is the start of the strategy, and that's where the investment is being put into the business. That's where the growth is going to be happening. And if you look towards the end of the sale or the end of the timeline, that is usually where that business is being shaped for sale. So that might mean cost cutting or consolidation of different things, or it might mean those types of projects, rather than new proposition development or new product development or kind of core growth. And this timeline will vary depending on what the size of the investment was or who the investors are. So a private equity might look at a 6-year timeline, a VC might look at a shorter timeline, and you should feel entitled to ask for any of this information when you are considering a role. What is that money? What money have you got? What do you intend to spend it on? And where are you going to be investing? And if your role is in the product or technology team, you want to know that's where the money's going. If your role is marketing, you want to know that you're going to get the investment that you need to be able to do interesting things. There's usually another bubble sort of towards the back end where there might be a bit more growth and innovation, but really, as I think you'll get the point of what I'm saying here. The interesting point to be involved is when that new strategy is launched and is being executed. And then the final thing that I want to say is that if you are taking a role anywhere, even if that's with a friend doing a startup, you shouldn't pick a boss. You should pick a teacher. And the person that I always think of when I tell the story is someone that I worked with at Postbox. His name is Dave Washer, and he is one of the best product gurus, I'd say, operating in the UK and the US. He's an amazing speaker as well. Go and look up his talks. He's super compelling. And I really wanted to work for Dave. He turned up at Photobox, and I thought, that is an incredible product leader. I need to learn everything I can from Dave about products. And so I managed to get a job in his team, and I can tell you now that I don't think I ever learned a thing about product from Dave. I don't think he ever taught me any product theory or told me any methodologies, or but what Dave did was he honed me as a leader, so I could look at him and understand how to lead. And what he helped me to understand was how to manage my team, how to talk to the board, how to shape a strategy. And he did that by letting me be behind the wheel and guiding me as I did that, rather than teaching me or training me how to do things. He let me learn, and he shaped me. He shaped my thinking and helped me to do that effectively, making sure that I didn't fail, because he was there to support me. But he didn't tell me what to do. He told me, he used coaching language and challenged it to help me do that. And that is what you need to find in a boss or any working relationship. And I want to leave you with one last question that you have to promise me, if you've listened to this whole talk, that you will ask whenever you're considering taking any job. And the important thing is that you ask this question of every single person that you meet in the interview process, whether that's a colleague or someone who might be in your team, or whether it's your new boss. You need to ask them this one question. And the question is, are you still doing the job that you got hired to do? Because if you want to work in a growth business and you want to make sure that the business that you're going into work in is a growth business, then the answer to this question has got to be no, unless they've just joined that company. It's got to be no. Because what you want to know is that someone got hired to do one thing, but because they got hired into a scaling business where there's room to move and room to grow, room to move up, they started out doing one thing and they were very quickly able to move into doing a much broader portfolio of work, because that is what you're going to need to do. And that is also the number one sign that you are talking to a growth business, is that they are scaling so fast that the ability to take on new tasks and new learnings is absolutely fundamental to anyone coming into that business. I quite often say to people who I'm interviewing for Carwow, don't come for this role, come for the company, come for the value, come for the proposition and the belief in what we're doing, because your job will not be the same in 3 months time, in 6 months time, or in 12 months time, because the business won't be the same in that time period as well. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to seeing what questions you might have for me.
Thank you very much, Sally. What an excellent presentation. And I'm sure you'll be looking to have maybe a sip of water, or just being able to rest after delivering all this information. But we really want to thank you for being just so detailed in the guidance you shared. So the good news is that we have a good number of questions that have come through, and we'll be able to have a look at them together. So perhaps they've been slightly categorized to make it easier to go through them. So if we take the first one here, I'll be reading them out for you. So I'm an illustration student with an interest in graphic design and advertising. Could you suggest any creative roles that would be suitable in the marketing industry? Carwow sounds like an exciting company, but I'm not sure where my skill set would fit.
Interesting. So look, I think when you look across where we use creative talent, I can talk about the business that I'm in now and where we use graphic design, and we use it sort of and that type of skill set. We use it across 3 different areas of our business. One is in marketing, where we have a creative team who produce creative material for our advertising. So they'll make ads for social, they'll brand stuff. They might help us with making presentation decks that we take out to partners, for example. That team is relatively small. They tend to produce material for the teams that then the teams then evolve that. But that's one area. The other area to explore is UX and UI design. So that means taking graphic design into apps, into webs, and when we're trying to build a product, we're always looking at like, well, how should this look? And that's a really interesting space. And then the third area that we use it is in our magazines and our printed materials. We have 2 magazines, Evo magazine and Auto Express, and those have a lot of graphic design in them. And we use it we produce graphic design for our YouTube materials as well. My advice would be to try and see if you can find an internship in a company that you think is interesting, and to go and try out some of those roles. Most companies would be very happy to have you for a couple of days, and that will help to build your portfolio as well. The other advice I would give you is, obviously this is an area of massive AI development, and we are exploring a lot of these types of tools within our company, is if you can demonstrate your understanding of those tools and your ability to use them alongside your own personal generative skills, you'll be getting ahead of most people who are already in roles. And if you've got the time to do that and really kind of bring that through in the conversations, people will be very excited to speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. The next question would be, what step would you need to take to end up in a similar role to yours? For example, would a master's in marketing allow to progress in the sector that you're in, or a role that you're in at some point down the line?
Yeah. So I think, I said at the beginning, my career has been quite squiggly in that I studied journalism initially, and then I quickly figured out that journalism was actually a really great set of skills, because you spend a lot of time really deeply trying to understand a problem, and then once you use empathy to do that, and you do a lot of kind of spending time with people to understand things from their perspective, and then your job as a journalist is to explain that back to other people in a way that is really clear and structured, and in a way that they can engage with something and ideally do something about it, right? And what I figured very quickly was that is what a lot of people do when they are building systems and business analysis. That's what I figured out when I was doing my course at Westminster. I was like, oh, this is the same set of skills. I'm just applying them to a different set of problems. And then a lot of what I've done since has been has built on that. So product is very similar, talking to customers and trying to understand them. So I think what I encourage you to do is just try and understand what your core skill sets are, and what things you enjoy that you've learned through your course is like, what are the skills that I enjoy. And then I also wouldn't say worry too much about it. Take opportunities that come to you, and figure out what experience you're building into your portfolio. I quite often draw with my teams like a map of their experience, and most senior roles at my level, it's about breadth of experience. It's about having been in lots of different businesses, and it's about having solved lots of different types of problems and being able to connect those together when you are trying to solve things on a day-to-day basis. I think if you are very interested in being a chief commercial officer or having a general manager or MD role, and you can do an MBA or business degree early on in your career, I would recommend that. I didn't do it. I sometimes regret it. I think I'd be much better at managing finances. I have to use people to help me with that. I think a lot of people have really benefited from MBA style degrees as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on that slightly earlier, but what would you say are the main benefits to being part of a smaller size business, and particularly from your perspective as the person working in it? Do you think it allows you to be recognized a bit more easily just because of the scale of the team or the infrastructure you might be part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I quite like smaller businesses is they tend to be a lot less political. I think in big organizations, they tend to have a lot more people in them, and people guard their territories, and they'll be like, oh, that's my job, and take it off. And quite often I remember, particularly, at Sky, a very big organization, you'd start doing something and then you'd find out that someone else was doing it over there. And that used to drive me absolutely crazy, the kind of waste of that and the confusion that it generated. And what I really like about working in a smaller business is it's much faster. faster to make decisions, and so we'll sit down with my team, a problem will come up, and we'll be like, okay, well, let's change that, and we can change it tomorrow, and we don't need to get permission from lots of people, and we don't have to get sign off from our board or anything. We can make the decision, and the resources are allocated to us to be able to do that. And I absolutely love being able to do that type of fast decision making. I think also, when you're earlier in your career, you can move faster in smaller companies, because we'll turn around and go like, who thinks they can do this? And someone will go like, me. And they've been waiting for the chance to have a go at it, and we're like, right, go, what are you going to need? We'll support you on that. And I think when I look through my team, many of whom have been at Carwow for a long time, they have grown up in this business, and many of them have been here for, but they've had such different roles, because they've had some of their core skills, they're clear on what their core skills are, and they've just kept putting their hands up for different things. And I think that's some of the joy of a small company, is you get this broader diversity in your role. You get to tend to do more things.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to follow up on that, what do you think helps a team member being really clear about their skill sets and what they can bring to the table? What have you seen that has worked really well, and that has made you, perhaps as a manager yourself, really notice one of your team members in the way they communicated their skill set?
Yeah, I think that's quite a tricky one, because I think, if you can just start by asking people, right? So if you've had working groups at university and you've done projects together, I think you generally always do group projects. Ask your group, like, what was I best at? Ask your friends, if you were to describe me to someone, how would you describe me? Most people have a set of kind of core soft skills that they will have for the rest of their life, like whether it's communication, or they just people get on with them. They get on with people easy. They're really sociable. They might be very persuasive. All of those types of things are really foundational skills that you're not going to have to work at through your career. And so the things that you can probably spend most of your time thinking about in terms of your development are the ones that you do have to work at, because you'll end up having to complement them with things that you've already got. And so I'd encourage you to just ask people, ask your parents, ask your friends, and start there. Like, if you were to describe me, what do you think I would be good at? And then test that out as you do roles, and ask the people that you're working with to help you understand.
Yeah, thank you very much. So now a series of questions, perhaps a bit more related to building a business. So one of them is, what would you say would be needed to predict trends and use trends in your favor as a business to just start and grow it?
Yeah. Look, if you're starting, so I think that question is about, is that question about someone doing their own business, or that about my business?
Yeah, I think as a business, as in general, how would you go about keeping in touch?
Yeah, I think if you're starting if you want to do your own business and you need to understand trends, there's a lot you can do yourself without spending any money. You can start off by reading a lot, listening to podcasts, all of that kind of stuff, to understand topics that are emerging repeatedly. That's a trend emerging. Google provide a ton of free data. That means you can, for example, just go and look at the growth of a particular search term over time. So you can put a search term like recycling into Google, and you can see how many people are searching for recycling, and you can understand how that trend has compared to other things over time, for example. And that's just one or two of the kind of very simplistic tools. But if you are working in a bigger business and you have some budget you can spend, then we invest in a number of different data sources that support us on trends. So we get a lot from Google. Google help us to understand what our traffic is going to look like, how many people are going to come to Carwow. We look at market pricing. We pay for market pricing tools that forecast how car prices are going to change over time. And so as soon as you're in a particular sector, there will be data sources that will help you to understand what's going to happen. I mean, at Photobox, I worked with an extraordinary business who were able to forecast like interior design and color trends ahead. It was amazing how they did this. They were very, very expensive because they were so good. And by the way, if you can't find one, that's a gap in the market, and you should immediately build a business that helps people to understand trends in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And specific question now, is there a particular channel that you would recommend for selling wellness advice? Is there a particular online channel, marketing channel that you think could work well for wellness business?
So for wellness,
Yeah.
I mean, I think channels are, look, whenever you're building a business, you're looking at multiple ways to build an audience, and you should be investing as much time and effort as you can in what we call organic or free sources of content. So anything that you can do to build social channels, so using your own social channels, so putting your own stuff on your own Instagram posts or your own Facebook posts and your own TikTok channels, etc., where the cost is really just your time and to produce the videos. So start there, start with organic because it's free, and writing content that surfaces in SEO. And you can use Google to understand, Google provides all of this information for you to understand what the main keyword terms are that you should be targeting, because there's enough volume around that. So you want to say, like, is the wellness around which particular aspects of wellness do you think you're best at, and then understand the volume of words that you can target around that, and then focus your content on that. Start with organic. It's free. Hard work, but free. And then look at where your audience is going to be and how you can access that audience. So for something like wellness, I would almost certainly advise looking at influencer audiences on social channels and so forth. But again, it depends exactly what the product is. Is it a subscription product, like a video subscription product? Absolutely. Or is it tablets or something like that, which probably you'd want to look at PPC for that, because people who are actively looking to buy something start in Google and tend to do their transaction from there once they know what the brand is. So very complicated question, but my advice would be, if you're not sure where to start with trying to build an organic audience.
Brilliant, thank you. We talked about UX, a bit earlier. What would you say, is it good practice to ask the audience to follow a user-centered design approach? And is this approach something that you have considered?
I have to say I'm a bit out of touch with exact terminologies on UX, so I'd have to defer that one. But I'm happy to ask my team and share back if that's useful. Without sort of being totally familiar with that methodology, like anything that says user-centered, it is almost certainly going to be the right approach. Like anything that we do, I don't know whether that is exact terminology. We identify personas, we work out exactly what they're trying to do at any one point in time, and that is the heart of what we're designing around. So it's almost certainly that is probably the technical name for exactly how we're working.
Absolutely. So next question again about starting a business. So it will be really difficult in the early stages of setting up a business because of the lack of resources in general, or limited resources available. So from your understanding, how can someone wanting to start a business approach that early stage phase of not having a lot of cash to be using and putting into the business, before getting any perhaps investor funding to support the business? How would they approach perhaps finding some of that early stage funding, or perhaps focusing on generating revenue first? What would you say might be a good strategy for someone looking to get started and accessing that really crucial early stage money?
Yeah. So I'm definitely not an expert in this, but I can share some of the, I've sat on panels at universities and I've sat on funding panels, which have been sort of more what's called seed investment. So that very first amount, like, the under 100 grand type investments. And my advice to this would be, if you can find a way to start generating revenue and prove your business model in a tangible way, then you should do that before you try to get seed funding. And the reason for that is because the more proof points you've got, the higher the confidence will be in your business model, the more people will be interested to invest, the more competitive that investment will be, and the better deal that you will get out of that, i.e. the more money you'll get and the more of your business that you will retain ownership of through that early investment stage. Usually the way it works is that the first investors get a really kind of significant chunk, and then the chunk you get goes down as the business value kind of goes up. And so anything that you can do to tangibly demonstrate the value of that business and and the product that you're trying to prove is going to put you in a much better position. So that would be my advice. If you can find ways to start proving your product and generating revenue, even if if it's a business to business product, you can come in and say, I've got these 3 contracts signed, and these 3 people are ready to buy our product when we want off. It's an agreement in principle. And you can show the value of those contracts. This is a £5,000 contract. This is a £5,000. This, and I've got all these people waiting to go. The more that you can demonstrate that tangibly, the more likely. And then the other thing I'd say to explore is like, if you're interested in innovation, the UK government is phenomenal at funding early stage investment, and there are all sorts of different channels that you can explore to unlock innovation funding, many of which will be through Westminster, who can connect you to funds, and for that seed round, that's actually one of the easiest, is to get some interest in your proposition. But again, you will just get much more traction if you've been able to get through some of those early founder hurdles and generate some revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you worked for quite a few growth businesses, and you were there at the right time, in the right place. So for anyone listening, how would they go about finding those types of businesses? Where really should they focus their time? Is there any particular platform that comes to mind where they might come across these companies, or any of your ideas on, for current students, where should they be looking to find these really interesting sectors and companies to maybe work for?
So I think my advice would be to start with the marketplace. Like, what's a marketplace that interests you? I mean, I say that I would never have looked at automotive until I started really looking at automotive, but see if you can find things where there are interesting things going on, and then try and identify within that market businesses that look interesting. Someone of Carwow size you would probably hear about once you started looking at automotive, because as soon as you started searching for stuff, we would come up. But if you were looking for something smaller than that, it does get a bit more complicated. You can use, I'm going to totally forget the name of it now, but look for investment. So I can't remember. I'm sure someone in the chat will remember the name of this business, who basically publish everyone who gets an investment. And that's a great place to go and find interesting startups, because you can search that by category, and you can then look, these guys have just closed some funding, never heard of them before, they've done no brand marketing, you've never heard of this business before, but you can read all about them and you can see how much investment they've got, who their investors were. I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember it. I'm sure someone will remember. But those types of sites are great for basically identifying like where there's interesting businesses, and also to my point at the end there about who's landed some cash and what are they planning to spend that cash on, because that's a really good time to kind of start to join those businesses. And then I don't not spend time on Glassdoor and Trustpilot looking at how those businesses are performing, both in terms of the people that are working for them and the people that are using their products.
Is it Crunchbase by any chance?
Yes. Okay. Thank you to whoever remembered that.
Great.
That's a end of a long day.
Absolutely. And next question is actually Carwow specific. Does Carwow use offline advertisements, or is it all done through online platforms?
We do a mix of stuff. We're about to take my bit of the business to Germany, and there I'm going to do a big offline test, because I'm going to choose a region of Germany, and we're going to blast it with leaflets and on-car things and all of that type of stuff, because if we isolate a region, we can tell how well that then performed by how many people come from that region onto the platform. And that's going to be a really interesting test. And that's how we approach a lot of our marketing, is if we're trying to decide, should we do X or Y, we isolate a test, we look at all the data that flows through from that test, and then we work out whether it's worth scaling it back up again and doing it in other regions. We tend to do a lot less, kind of trying to think of we do out of home. So out of home is like on billboards and that type of thing. We do quite a lot of radio, that both kind of relatively low cost channels. We've done quite a lot in the Tube. The Tube is actually really good. We've done taxis. And in each case, we're looking at whether, like, taxis are easy because you just do them in London, and then you can see whether that comes through into your London searches and whether people from London are coming on. And so we've experimented with a lot of that type of stuff. Yeah,
I think experimenting is key. I think in testing any of these marketing strategies.
Exactly.
A few questions now. So about you and your journey. So are there particular setbacks during the projects you've been involved in that change or perhaps improved your perspective in your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell a story like this and it all like stitches together nicely. It's never that tidy as you're going through it. It can often feel very messy. And I definitely think there's been points at which we've thought, actually, that's really failed. And I think in all of those cases, and like, I've talked about some of the lessons we learned along the way. And in each case, the thing that I feel like I came out of it with was more resilience and perspective. So the thing that improved was my perspective on the perspective. When you go through your first really, really challenging trading period where there's, you just not managing to hit your numbers, or people are struggling with your product, whatever it might be, and you've got all the pressure on you from your boss, from your boss's boss, from your investors, whatever it might be. It's really, really, really hard. But you come out of that knowing learning that you can turn it around eventually, but also that you come out of that with really high resilience about like how about being able to do it again. I think probably the hardest thing I did in my professional life was I had ran a consultancy business for many years, which I even forgot to mention in my story. At 4 years, I had a team of around, I think it was about 20 of us all together, and we made a very difficult decision to close that business after 4 years. And I think it was the right decision to make, but it was an incredibly difficult one. And again, I think the thing that I got out of that was resilience. And if I had started the same kind of business again, I would have done different things and I would have learnt loads from it. But I think the main thing that you need is that persistence to keep going and to try again, because all of these things affect your confidence. And it's only with kind of, going through that you believe, I can keep going, I can do it again.
Absolutely. And perhaps a bit more around your transition from working in journalism to a digital business. I think we can probably all expect now in our careers to be doing a range of different roles across different sectors and skill sets. So how are you reflecting now on this? And would you ever imagine a complete another 180 degree career change, for example?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine going back to journalism, I suppose, in the way I did. But interestingly, I work for a journalism business again. I seem to have I spent quite a lot of my time thinking I'm done with journalism, and then I land up in a business that is effectively a journalism business. A lot of what Carwow do is produce content that enables people to make good decisions about buying their cars, and that's a really important part of what we do. And I love going out with our editorial teams, and it's really fun. But I know that I now enjoy what I do so much more than I ever did with journalism. I love building businesses, and I love growing businesses, and I love doing that by building better and better things for our customers and our partners. And what I know, the thing that gets me out of bed every morning and the things that I get excited about are being able to solve a problem in a different way, and in a way that really works for customers or partners, and that's what I know I get excited about.
Thank you so much, Sally. This is the end of our questions for this evening. Thank you so much for your time, and again, all the information that you shared, it was absolutely brilliant, and I'm really glad we connected as well for this event. It was fantastic to have you. For everyone listening, please do complete this short survey to be able to give us some feedback about this evening's event. We will be emailing you by tomorrow the link to the YouTube recording. And finally, the next What It Takes event will be What It Takes to Make Your Voice Heard, and it will take place online again on Wednesday, the 20th of November. I want to thank you all, Sally and everyone listening, for joining, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you.